As a big fan of Remedy Entertainment's first two installments of the Max Payne franchise, I was very pleased to hear that Remedy would be returning to Sony consoles for their latest game, Control, as the last game that they ever made for a Sony console was in fact Max Payne 2 all the way back in 2003, and since then they've mainly been making games for Microsoft consoles in the form of Alan Wake and Quantum Break, two games that I really wish I could have played. Going into Control, I really wasn't sure what to expect, as details of the game were very limiting, and as an outsider looking in, this game seemed that it was just going to be another solid third-person shooter. Having completed the game, I can now say that Control ended up being a far better game than I thought it would be, and having a game with such unique identity simply helps it stand apart from just about any game that I've played throughout the entire 8th generation of gaming. Now, the actual story for Control is rather complicated to explain, but if I could simplify it, imagine the movie Inception taking place inside the Men in Black's main facility, but instead of dealing with extraterrestrials, you are instead dealing with a paranormal situation, and that in a nutshell best describes what you should expect from Control. Now, to go into a bit more detail, this entire game centers around the character of Jesse, whose younger brother Dylan was taken by the Federal Bureau of Control, or FBC, and Jesse has spent years trying to find out exactly where the FBC was located, and when she finally does, she arrives just as a paranormal threat called the Hiss arrives, placing the entire building into lockdown, and just when the current director of the FBC dies under mysterious reasons, he unexpectedly passes the title of director to Jesse. As director, Jesse is tasked with exploring throughout the entire FBC facility and bringing together all of the surviving employees throughout the building and discovering exactly what the Hiss is, what this event's connections to Jesse's past are, and exactly what happened to her brother Dylan. As a story-driven gamer, Control is a perfect example that solo-only story-driven games without multiplayer are indeed still alive in 2019. And while the story at first throws a lot of information at you from the very beginning, for me it didn't feel too overwhelming, but instead the mystery of what was going on and my desire to want to know more about this intriguing scenario was the driving force that kept me playing for hours on end. And by the end of the game, though there were still a few small elements of the story that still didn't make too much sense to me, I understood just enough that I was very pleased with the type of story that Remedy Entertainment wanted to tell here. The main protagonist, Jesse, is a very fascinating character who goes through a rather dramatic character change throughout the game, coming into the FBC building with a single-minded objective, but as the game progresses and you see her experience against the Hiss, her interactions with the FBC employees emboldens her to take a much more active role, and by the end she ends up becoming a much better person because of it. Though Jesse's character is fully fleshed out wonderfully, I cannot say the same thing about the supporting cast. Each FBC employee that you meet has a specific section of the game where you will have to go to them in order to progress, but once you're past that point, they really aren't given anything to do. Moving forward, one of the main concerns with this game's plot that I have is with the kind of setting that this game provides. It's really unclear on whether or not Remedy Entertainment wants this game's story to continue. There are certainly a number of plot elements left open, but with how the game is structured, and it is centered entirely upon keeping the threat of the Hiss maintained within the building, going outside of the building may be a bit too much, and having a sequel take place within the same location would make a sequel feel too repetitive. When it comes to its gameplay style, Control operates as an action-based exploration third-person shooter. The game will have you venturing into all different kinds of levels and locations throughout the FBC facility, fighting off waves of Hiss enemies and completing objectives. When it comes to the exploration of the FBC facility, it is separated into 4 different levels that are Executive, Maintenance, Research, and Containment. As I'm sure you can already guess, each level has a distinctive look and its own unique quality of platforming that you will have to use in order to progress through specific sections of the levels. Throughout these different levels are specialized zone points that once you've cleansed them, you can then use them as fast travel points to help you get from one location to another rather quickly. Within certain locations of each level, you will come across a few NPCs that you can talk to, and you can actually use them to learn more about the current situation, or if you want, you can take on side missions for them, and by completing these assignments, you can then get special level ups. There is also a massive amount of collectibles that you will come across located everywhere, and they range from research records that will give you more insight to what the FBC does, and even cassette tapes that you can listen to. When it comes to the enemy variety of the Hiss, I would have to say that as you progress through the game, you will certainly encounter a solid amount of different enemies throughout the different levels that all have unique movement and attack patterns, and when fighting against a lot of different enemies at once, it becomes extremely important to use all of your abilities and resources to their maximum ability, as making the wrong move or reacting not fast enough can result with you getting killed rather easily, even if you've maxed out your health. There are a number of boss-like enemies spread throughout the game, but some of the much bigger bosses will require you to have to go out of your way in order to find them. When it comes to fighting against the Hiss, you must rely on the use of your primary firearm, which is called a service weapon, along with the unique amount of offensive, defensive, and evasive powers that you will acquire throughout the game. As you progress through the game, you will collect blueprints that will allow you to create different models of your service weapon, with each model having a different firing mode. There are also a number of mods that you can attach to each of your service weapon models to help improve the weapon's performance. When it comes to your powers, you'll be granted 4 primary abilities that you will gain after collecting specific items, which are called objects of power. The 4 powers that you will acquire are Launch, which allows you to use telekinesis to throw objects at a target. Shield allows you to surround yourself with concrete to protect you from oncoming fire. Seize allows you to take control of an enemy's mind and turn them against their allies in battle, and Levitate allows you to move through and even allows you to reach higher platforms, along with making yourself a much harder target to hit. Like your service weapon, these powers can also be upgraded over time, and you can even attach special mods to Jessie to enhance the capabilities of some of your powers. When it comes to Control's overall game design, the developers at Remedy Entertainment really knocked this one out of the park. During cutscenes and specific walking sections, they seem to apply this little technique of mixing live action and gameplay visuals to create a unique look that I can't recall ever seeing in any other game before. Though the character models, I must confess, don't have the greatest look, the overall level design is truly incredible and unlike anything that I've ever seen in any other game. The overall look of each specific location is very creative and well thought out, and in one section they managed to create what I would easily consider to be one of the most visually technical, impressive uses of level design that I've ever seen, and is something that is taken right out of my favorite movie of all time, Inception, or more recently, Marvel's Doctor Strange film. The levels also incorporate an impressive use of destructible environments that only add to the overall experience while playing this game and fighting against the Hiss. There's also a great deal of Easter eggs and references to other popular Remedy Entertainment games that I really wasn't expecting but was ecstatic to see. When it comes to the game's soundtrack, the music that plays throughout specific moments in the game masterfully adds to the entire atmosphere that Control presents here. And in a shocking surprise, for me at least, this game also includes music from one of my favorite bands that I was first introduced to when I first played Max Payne 2 all the way back in 2003, and I've been listening to them ever since. So to see them here in this game was a pleasant surprise, and for me at least, it seems that this element has always been a little addition that Remedy Entertainment has always added in a number of their games, and one that I have enjoyed for many years. Now, when it comes to certain games, I usually have a pretty good sense of what I can expect for them going in. And going into Control, I knew that the fact that this game came from Remedy Entertainment Studios, I knew that at a bare minimum, this game was just going to be a good game to play through. But now having completed it, I can openly say that this game blew all my expectations out of the water. This was far better than I thought it could be, and because of that, this ended up being a must-own title for not just me, but I think anyone who's looking for a awesome single-player solo story-driven experience. Now obviously I don't think that Control is entirely perfect, and I think that the one gameplay mechanic that this game really would have benefited from is having at least a choose your responses in terms of the dialogue sections, because I think having something like that really would have added to the conversations, and I think perhaps having different outcomes in terms of how those conversations play out really might have perhaps added a few different outcomes in terms of specific moments that happen throughout the game. But that doesn't stop this game from being as great as it was, because it was a blast to play through. Now, if I had to give this game a rating, by the middle point of this game, I was sitting at about a 7.5 or an 8. But once those extra Easter eggs and surprises came, I knew I had to bump this sucker up to at least a 9 out of 10. This is an incredible game and a must-play title for anyone who's still curious about it. And in my opinion, I think that, at least for me, this is certainly a Game of the Year contender. I'm not saying it should win Game of the Year, but it's at least a contender, at least in my eyes. Now, if you liked my game review, I really would appreciate if you could press that like and subscribe button to help grow the channel, as well as share your thoughts if you happen to play Control, and share your thoughts with everyone else, including myself. And you can also press one of the links in the description down below so you can follow me on all my social media outlets, including Twitter and Instagram, and even support me on Patreon. And like always, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.